Hi everyone, my name is Maya Fortune from Tribeca New Music. I'm here with Jonah Cohen, our Young Composer Competition Division 2 winner, and I'm super excited to be here to talk about your composition, That Special Place, as well as the performance, the Bergamot Quartet on November 2nd at Benziken Hall at the DiMenna Center. Thank you so much for being with me here today.
Hi Maya, so excited to be here and to talk with you.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about your journey as a musician, as a composer, and a conductor, I see?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to. Well, it really all started when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and I started as a pianist actually. So I begged and begged my parents to get a piano, and eventually they caved in. I'm sure those first couple of years were a little rough for them as I was getting the hang of it, but they were very generous and they got me lessons with a really great teacher, and that really launched my love of music and my love of classical music. But actually, at that point, I didn't even realize that new classical music was being written. I didn't, and from about the ages of 6 to I would say 11 or 12, which is after I started also playing in cello and playing in my school string orchestra. I just had no idea that new classical music existed. I thought that, pop music was like the evolution of classical music and that classical music was a thing of the past. And I remember very distinctly one day when I was in, I think, sixth grade in string orchestra, I was playing the cello, and we had done in the past some arrangements of like, Mozart overtures and other, and we also did a lot of arrangements of pop music. But I remember one day we did a piece by a living composer, and my teacher made it very clear, like, class, this is by a composer who is still alive. And I remember that just very simple message just really struck me. And I was like, this is really still happening. Maybe I could try this. And then from there, I just started experimenting. It started out very much as a composition. I mean, it started out very much as a hobby for me. And then it just grew into a passion and to, what I do most of the time today. So that's my journey as a composer, and my love of conducting really stemmed out of my love for composition, and my love for classical music in general.
That is so cool. And you're now studying at Juilliard, correct?
Yes, I'm a third year undergrad already somehow at Juilliard.
Wow. Yeah, junior year is crazy. It's a
It
new.
is crazy.
Is
You've been
there
there.
anything new in your education now being in Juilliard and being in school you want to share, like a technique or something that you find interesting that you didn't know before you had that space with other composers to discuss and collaborate?
One thing that's just on my mind right now, because it's just so fascinating, is I'm in this class called Advanced Counterpoint, which is as intimidating as it sounds.
Yeah.
Um, but it's a really fantastic class taught by a really wonderful professor named Philip Lasser. He's also a very well-known composer in his own right. But the class is just it's encouraging me to think about not just counterpoint, but about how these pieces are structured and about music in general in just a completely new way. He has such a unique way of thinking about music and thinking about motive, especially. That's just really been like revolutionary for me, and I just can't stop really thinking about it. And that's a class I get to take with all of the composers in my year. So we have lots of debrief sessions after all the classes. Just, what just happened? Yeah, it's really, really just completely shifting the way I think about music.
Wow.
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And, speaking of motive, I saw on your website that you want to make music accessible, but then explore sonic realms that are very new. How do you kind of balance that? Because that's really, I feel like it's very hard in new classical music, being able to relate to the audience, but then also do something completely different than they've heard before.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's to me one of the hardest things about being a composer, because exactly like you said, I want to write music that is approachable, is, not, it doesn't scare people off. It might have something to say to anyone, not just, someone who's been immersed in the classical music world for 60 years or that sort of thing. But I also want to write music that's, it challenges people and encourages them to ask questions and things like that, and is maybe not necessarily like a completely enjoyable experience. In my mind, I really I strive more for memorable and impactful than enjoyable. I think those are a little bit different to me. It's just a continuous mental sort of tug of war in my mind, basically. I mean, I think at the baseline, I want to write music that, you know, I personally really believe in and really love and really feel like it needs to be shared. And I think that's the thing that drives uh, the bulk of my creative process. But when I'm thinking about, sort of the packaging of that music and, the way that I contextualize these materials and the way that I, put things together and that sort of thing, I think a lot about creating something that can really stand up to repeated listening and is really, challenging and yeah, perhaps uncomfortable at times, but also, maybe has a little something for everyone.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a thoughtful answer. And you've really, in this moment, transferred what I think of the word accessibility, because accessible doesn't always need to mean enjoyable. It can also mean memorable. And I think that that makes a
I
lot
think
of
so.
sense. And now I'm going to think about that in a different way. Oh, is this a memorable performance or is it just enjoyable? How have you kind of put this conundrum that you're facing in your compositional life into that special place? Like, how was that special place created, and what was your process creating it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is actually a very fitting example because it's something that I thought a lot about with this piece, and it's a piece that's really, really personal to me. It has, I mean, it's basically a piece about my childhood, and especially some of my earliest musical experiences, which actually just occurred in car rides with my father, not at the symphony hall or not at like a big concert or even playing music at the piano. This is even before that, just in the car, maybe when my dad would be driving me to baseball practice or home from school or something like that. And I just have these vivid memories of him absolutely blasting like 80s rock and like grunge and that sort of thing. And there were times where I'd be like, turn it down a little bit and that sort of thing. But it really became a formative part of my childhood in a way that I didn't realize at the time at all. So this and nowadays I really, I love this sort of treasure trove of music, Led Zeppelin, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard, all of my dad's favorite bands. And I think in another sense, I actually feel that my compositional language and my compositional instincts have actually been very fundamentally impacted by those early experiences and that type of music, which is it seems to be so far from classical music, but in my mind, it really isn't. I mean, I think it influences my sense of rhythm and ostinato and groove and that sort of thing. Basically, that special place is a piece that I wanted to write for a very long time. It was a piece that really was. I felt like I had dealt with this sort of influence of 80s rock and that sort of music indirectly in the past. I had sort of like, maybe brushed on it in other pieces, but I really wanted to write a piece about this sort of music and about, inspired I am by it, and in turn, how inspired I am by my father, actually.
Um, so did you work with a quartet while, and sorry, piano quartet while you were creating this piece, or did you compose it and then kind of fit it in with musicians? How was that sort of collaborative process for you?
Well, I had the privilege of writing this piece while I was participating in a young composers program. It's called the Celestina. Um, sounds promising young composers program. If there are any young composers watching this right now, I urge you to apply for this program. You can be like from age like I don't know 16 or 18 all the way up to like 35 or 40 or something. So it's a big age range. It's one of the best programs I've ever been a part of in so many senses. I mean, just the sense of community between not just the composers, but the fact that we were integrated really for a time into the organization of Celestina. So basically, we got to see like the inner workings of sort of a chamber music society or chamber music organization. And we really got intimately acquainted with the artistic directors and the performers as well. So I wrote the piece for four performers who are a part of the Celestina collective. And I was privileged to be also mentored by the amazing composer Derek Sky during this process. So I worked with him on the piece. And I worked with these players, and I was really fortunate to have the opportunity to ask them questions beforehand and workshop the piece, and that really changed how it developed too, as it often does with my music. Yeah, again, if anyone is in the target population for this program, please apply. I think they're actually applying, accepting applications right now.
You've also been sort of an entrepreneur, at least from what I can see, because you have the Now Beat project. Do you want to talk a tiny bit about that? Because I was really interested when I read about it.
The Nowbeat Project is a free outreach program for young composers, even younger than myself. I'm still a young composer, but the young composers in the age range 12 to 16 years old. So it's a little on the the very beginning stages of composering. So what we do basically is we provide free mentorship, performance, and networking opportunities for young composers around the country and around the world. We're just about to enter our fifth year of operation, and we've served, I think, at this point, over 50 composers from 17 US states and five countries. And so it's a project that started out of the pandemic. Um, because at this point I was a high school student, and I had the extraordinary privilege of attending the Interlochen Arts Academy for the last 2 years of my high school career. And in this setting, I was able to still pursue and engage in in-person music making, while most people around this is in the fall of 2020, for context. So most people, especially young composers, like all semblance of opportunity just gone completely out of the window. It just was, not even in the question. But here I was, getting to really experience these incredible things. And I was like, the least I can do is just try to spread that wealth a little bit while I'm still at Interlochen. So it started fully on Zoom, and that really has continued pretty much until today, because I think it's one of the things that has been one of the best tools in our toolbox, even now that more in-person stuff is, happening again, because it takes away so many barriers. We can have composers from all around the world at any time for no cost. It's free to have. Zoom is free to have as long as you have some, device or something like that. And it's literally there's no application fee, there's no participation fee. Um, it's just it's such a beautiful way to really eliminate a lot of those barriers that prevent composers from actually progressing.
Yeah, I think if I had a program like that, maybe I would start composing. But oh, that's really great what you're doing. So, one of the questions we always ask at Tribeca New Music is, what are you listening to right now? If you had a playlist of a few artists, composers, what would you tell us?
It's a wide mix of things. I've been really into so I walk to and from school every day. It takes about 20 minutes, and I've been really into getting into like cycles of a composer's work. So right now I'm actually listening to all the Mahler symphonies. So I'm at the end of Mahler 3 right now, which is just sublime. I had only heard it like once or twice before, but I've re-listened to the last movement like four times now. It's just it's otherworldly. But in terms of newer stuff and newer music, I've been really getting obsessed with the music of Unsuk Chin. Um, she has a concerto for Shung, which I think is, just such a powerful piece, as well as an absolutely insane orchestra piece called Graffiti. And it has some of the most inventive orchestration I've ever seen. Like it uses the orchestra in just such a novel way. So I've been really obsessed with her music, and I've been perhaps stealing little parts of it in my music. I don't know, maybe. Um,
Inspiration.
yeah. And another composer that I've really been obsessed with is Gabriella Smith, who's a younger composer. I think she's still in her 30s. Somehow that's really intimidating because the stuff that she's writing is just so incredible. She has a pretty well-known string quartet called Carrot Revolution, which is just such a imaginative fusion of like a complete just diverse tapestry of musical worlds. Like there's some like Paratan in there from like medieval music, and there is like, some, bluegrass stuff, and it's just like a wild ride. So I would encourage anyone who hasn't heard it to check it out. I think it's one of the best new string quartets I've heard recently. It's just absolutely amazing.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for being with me today. If you want to hear Jonah's piece, That Special Place, it's on November 2nd at 7 p.m. at the DiMenna Center for Classical Music. Thank you so much.